Okay, so the other shape we're going to look at today is surface area of prisms. We've already looked at cylinders, so we don't need to do that again. But prisms, remember, are the ones that have polygon bases and have rectangle sides. So the total area of all the faces, that's what surface area is, right? It's the area of all the surfaces. And so one way we said, and we looked at this the other day to find the area, is to unfold this thing and find the area of this one and this one and this one and this side and this side and this side, and find all those areas and then add them all together. So find the area of each individual face using a net. And then add all the area of those faces. What we're going to look at today is that kind of takes a while. So let's see if we can find a shortcut to find the surface area of a prism. So some main components that we need to know of a prism is that it has two faces, also known as bases, that are congruent and parallel. So the bases, by the way, do not have to be the top and bottom, but they're the two sides. I like to think of it as the non-rectangles. Which two sides of this prism, of this shape, are not rectangles? In this case, the two pentagons, and that's my clue that those are the bases. All the other faces, all the other rectangles are called lateral faces. This comes from the Latin word latus, meaning side. Okay, so these are the side faces. So if we were to find the lateral faces, that would be all these green guys here. Okay, and then we'll see today that our height, and this is important, I want you to write this down, your height on any of these is the distance from one base to the other. It's the distance between the bases. And this is important because you need to know what the bases are and what the height are in order to find the surface area of this figure. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next page where all we're going to practice in this first example is label which faces are bases and which faces are lateral faces on the figure above. So we're going to start with labeling the faces that are bases. Okay, so, and then we'll come back and do the lateral faces. Okay, so first of all, in this first one, we're just identifying what are the bases, what are the non-rectangle sides. And so the bases here are the top and the bottom. How did you know that, Miss Benton? Because those are the two non-rectangles. So again, on this second one, and really what I hope you would do is pause the video for a second and give it your best guess as to what the bases are on these next four figures. So go ahead, pause the video, and then we'll come back and check. Okay, so on this on this next one, the triangular prism, it was the top and the bottom. The triangles were the bases. Those were the non-rectangles. On the next one, this is tricky because all the sides are rectangles or squares, right? And so what you get to do in this situation on a rectangular prism, or this one even really looks like a cube in which side all the sides are congruent, is you get to pick which two sides are the bases. It doesn't really matter since they're all rectangles. So I'm going to pick the top and the bottom, but if you pick the front and the back or the left and the right side, it's two sides. Remember, they do still have to be parallel, but you just pick two sides that are going to be congruent and parallel. Okay, then on the next one, the trapezoidal prism, this is a hard one for a lot of folks, but it's actually the trapezoids at the front and the back. Those are the two non-rectangle sides, so those are our bases. And then the last triangular prism, it's this right and left-hand side, and we know that again because those are the non-rectangles. Okay, the next thing I'm not really going to worry about, to be honest, is the lateral faces. It's not as important of a concept, but it's super important for you to know which sides are the bases And basically the lateral faces are all the rectangles on all of these shapes. So we talked about a minute ago that the height of a prism is the length of the altitude. In case you've forgotten what an altitude is, or lateral edge in this case, it's just an edge of the side of this shape. So this is a side edge is what that means, a lateral edge. An altitude is perpendicular, a segment perpendicular to both bases. So like we said, you can think of the height of a prism as the perpendicular distance between those bases. So in example 2, it says label the height on each prism above. So we're just going to go back up to these shapes up here and label the height. So the distance between the bases, you could label it here as that lateral edge, that side edge. It doesn't matter. You could label it here as the height. You pick. Any of those side edges will work. It could be this one, or that one in the back, or this other one in the back, or this one right here. Any of those will work. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video again. You try these 4. Try and label what you think is the height of the shape, and then we'll come back and discuss, okay? So on the triangular prism, I labeled my right-hand side as the height, that lateral edge. It could be this one. It could be this one. Doesn't matter. Just so long as it's the distance between those bases and it's perpendicular to both. Same thing here. It doesn't matter which one you pick. I'm going to label mine right there. Trapezoidal prism, again, this one gets a lot of folks. It can be this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. Any of those 4 would work for the height. It doesn't matter that it's turned on its side, that it's not a vertical height. Your height is just how far is it from one trapezoid to the other. And so you've got to show. That 10 is also showing. So if you marked that, that is also, it appears to be a lateral edge. And then lastly, on this triangular prism, any of these 3 lateral edges would have worked. You pick which one works for you as the height. All right, and in the next video, you're going to look at 2 different kinds of shapes, at straight up shapes and slanty shapes, and look at what that is called. Just know in part 2 here, where would the height be on these shapes? We already know the height is here. On the hexagonal prism, just keep in mind on an oblique prism, the height is outside the shape on the slanty one. Just like it would be on an obtuse triangle or something, the altitude would be outside.